Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and dear friends. I'm gonna send you a short video greeting to your meeting. The reason for that is not that I would have loved to be with you, but that I'm currently on the other side of the earth, that I'm down here in Auckland, New Zealand, and we don't want to put too much strain on the climate by too much flying. So I'll send it by video. My name is Matthias Kaiser, and I'm professor at the University of Bergen. I'll do this in English because I understand it's an English meeting. And I'm only going to send you some very, very short remarks on the topic of your meeting. And first of all, I have to say I'll do this with two of the hats I usually have. The one hat is as a philosopher of science who's particularly interested in the concept of knowledge and the varieties of knowledge, I must say. And indigenous knowledge culture is a specific issue in that topic. So this is my philosophy hat. And I also have another hat on, and that is my food ethics hat. I'm quite interested, as some of you may know, in food production, food consumption, that is basically in ethical issues all along the value chain, from the production to the middleman, to the processing, selling, and to the consumer. And at all these stages of the value chain, there will be value dilemmas. So these are my two hats, food ethics and philosophy of science. Let me start with the first one, with the philosophical issues. One of your focus is indigenous knowledge system. And from a philosophical point of view, we always start with the classics. There is a very classical definition of knowledge, and that is normally that knowledge is justified true belief. This goes back all the way to Plato and Aristotle. Now, truth in our knowledge systems is always assumed to be the case. If we find out it's not true, we don't call it knowledge anymore. And secondly, justified true belief. Belief, well, again, unless there's a belief, we certainly don't call it knowledge. The more problematic issue is this about justification. And that's where different knowledge systems differentiate. And I'll just mention the two that are in dispute here. The one is scientific knowledge. Obviously, scientific knowledge is based upon a specific way of justification. And that way includes mostly, or mainly, I must say, on the one hand, a whole range of scientific methods that produce certain results. And on the other hand, it includes a social element of validation. That is, scientific knowledge is validated through a process of criticisms from your peers, from scientific communities, and we call this somehow the peer review in various forms. So this is the basic justification in science. How is it for indigenous knowledge systems as a contrast? Well, they're also justified beliefs. And they're justified through more or less place-based or regional social traditions on the one hand, very often accompanied by personal experiences and narratives about them, and finally also through the transmission of trusted elders in the community. So these are the reasons why one would stick to, for example, indigenous belief systems or knowledge systems. Now, the important observations here is that those justifications are completely rational in the sense they give us good reasons to believe in that, but the reasons are different. So in that sense, there are rational systems. Where the differ is the value of the sources. So people actually value the sources differently and assign different weight to them. In science, tradition doesn't count for much, whereas in traditional systems of indigenous knowledge, they count for quite a bit. So the bias in modern society is to align these two knowledge systems and not to end up with a intellectual arrogance that only values scientific knowledge. In any case, this is not a matter of facts or reality, but it's a matter of whose values count the most. And I just cite as a reference here the post-normal science tradition, which I won't go into, but I give you the reference. So this is basically my approach and my view that we have to align them and we have to interact with both of them. And actually I can say that the people here in Auckland, in this particular center of Informed Futures, put a high stress and a lot of work on precisely this work. Food ethics now is a different issue. Food ethics has to observe that our modern ways, food ways, are in effect not sustainable in the long run. That our food production is out of sync with nature. That food security is not guaranteed on a global scale. And also that food consumption is mostly unhealthy, or very often unhealthy and wasteful. Now, there are more to say about this, and there is more to say about agricultural policies or fisheries policies and all of that. Let it be said only that mostly those tendencies are, in the long run, not sustainable. What we have observed is, from an ethical viewpoint, that we have commodified all of nature and all the animals around us. Now, one can say that respect for life and respect for nature is a basic value. This is particularly true in all indigenous community. However, somehow, in the modern Western world, we seem to partly have lost this tradition. We forget this, that we have to interact with nature and not against it. We don't have to subordinate it to our will, but we have, again, to work together with the laws of nature and all of this. So this respect for nature is still very dominant in indigenous cultures, as it is, for example, in the Sami culture, or here in the Maori culture. So in that sense, one of the conclusions I came up with is that indigenous food culture can be a guide and maybe a benchmark for more ethical and sustainable food in the future. And we would be wise to inform each other on these things. And I'm not saying that it's the only way, but we need to learn from each other. So this is my basic message to you and to your conference, that let us sit down and learn from each other. Let us use these traditions, let us use these different frames of knowledge and these different value systems that we start off in order to sort of mix them maybe and to learn from each other. And I hope that this conference where you are at in Kautokeino will actually contribute to this mutual learning process. I would have loved to be with you, but I'm looking forward to hear from the organizers later about the final results. I wish you good luck with this conference. Thank you very much.